All right. Hello, everybody.
Good
Welcome to,
morning.
there you go. Welcome to another episode of Digitize HQ. As we have Susan Berger with us today. Susan, welcome.
Thanks. Well, thank you. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So glad you're here. And we have a topic on digital selling. And so, why don't, in preparation for that, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody about your awesome background and experience and why you're so
Sure.
credible in talking about digital selling.
Well, I don't know about that, but so I spent 21 years at an advanced analytics company called SAS and was in a sales unit, financial services sales unit for 17 years, and then sort of morphed into digital selling enablement. Using LinkedIn and other social channels to share the expertise and offerings for our company and establishing and growing your digital brand. Did that for about 5 years and just took early retirement from SAS because I wanted to focus on this full time. And through conversations and networking via LinkedIn, started conversations with you and Thomas, and here I am.
Yeah, and we're glad we found you and you get
Oh,
to join the conversation. Well,
love it.
let's
I'm very passionate about it.
talk to us about that then. You're very passionate about digital selling. Why is that?
I think it was from my 17 years in a sales uh, division. I
Hmm.
saw great content created by marketing, but I saw the need for training the individual sales reps that are in the trenches day after day and carry the targets. Um, and then later on, the frustration of cold calling and having to get the meeting and the pressures of trying to transfer that to online and digital during COVID and how it is ramped up. I see the real need for more enablement and more tools that allow them to execute more efficiently and more effectively.
Okay. Thomas, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, sure. We've seen an enormous change, and oh, by the way, I'm Thomas Ross,
I'm so
and I
sorry.
that's okay. That's no big deal. I'm Thomas Ross, and I'm a partner and CRO with FunnelAmplified, and I've been doing sales training for, well, we don't even want to say how many years actually, but lots of years. And I've been doing the digital and the social training now for, geez, got to be five years. And I've been involved in the very transition that Susan has alluded to, and how that change has happened. One of the biggest things that we really want to make clear to everyone, and I try and do this as often as I can these days, is that social selling or digital enablement or sales enablement, whatever term you want to hitch to that, um, doesn't change everything you've learned to this point, right? And sales selling skills are still sales selling skills, and sales as we know it by way of the skills that you need to do it are as relevant today as they ever were. In fact, they may even be more relevant. That's not what's in question. What's in question is the method by which we start conversations with the very customers and clients that we want to have sales with, and vice versa. So that's where the opportunity is to take advantage of what digital can bring. So it's not that suddenly everything you've ever learned in sales, or the process that you've been using necessarily, or the system that you've been using, or the wonderful system you bought last year is suddenly no good. That's not true at
Mhm.
all.
Yeah.
What's true is we want to add to that, and we want to bring to you the additional of the digital skills, as Susan again alluded to, that we need to have, and that's what we're here to talk about. Is that helpful?
That's very helpful. Let's keep talking about it. So what is digital selling?
I
Silent.
Well, no,
Is that part?
I didn't mean to be silent. I just don't want to steal all the air in the room, or the three rooms, as it would be.
Yeah. As it
Well,
would
well,
be.
for me, it's about creating relationships, right? It's about creating relationships without getting on a plane, without, spending days in airports, and walking the halls at customers, which there is reason to do that. Don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
But I always used to say to people at SAS I was training that you can reach those people, you can be genuine, you can engage them, you can educate them, and you can excite them right from your chair. But there's a right way to do it. And it takes enablement, takes training. It's not an inherent skill just because you have been through sales methodology or you have a CRM system. It's like anything else. It needs to be taught and learned, and it's a skill.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that, Susan. And I think one of the observations that I've had is that digital selling has not, how do I say it? Digital selling was either LinkedIn trainers with, features and buttons and how to use the tool, not how to strategically use the tool. Or a lot of organizations too, and I think this is the same with any sales, they just kind of left sales to go figure it out on their own. I know my first sales job was that very stereotypical. Here's your desk, here's your phone, here's the phone book, go make sales. And I think that scenario is still happening a bit today when it comes to digital. Now, the change is, here's our email sequences, or here's the software tool or CRM, whatever they're using, that tells you who to call today, who to make the cold calls to. But when it comes to actually using LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or any of those to do what you just said, create conversations, I just don't see enough of that happening.
Yeah, and I think that gets back to what Susan said, and that's really the key. I mean, how many companies have we talked about that tells us one of two things? We're all over social. We're doing it. We're already
Or that's marketing's job.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Or we've, as Brandon said, we've utilized or hired LinkedIn trainers, and we didn't get the impact from that. Well, learning LinkedIn is not learning digital selling. Full stop, right? Learning LinkedIn is learning LinkedIn. That's great. But that is one small piece.
And it's a very helpful tool. And
Yes.
it's a very powerful tool. But it doesn't show you how to execute in the most successful way.
Right. I mean, I think, I was over the years and doing little stuff around the house with my son. I've always, I would hand him a tool. Maybe it was a shovel. We were digging a fire pit one time, and it's a shovel. It should dig. But I was watching him, and he was young. He was like, 5 or 6 years old, but he was really far down on the shovel and was just getting like little things of dirt at a time. And I had to show him how to actually let the handle be your leverage, and you can, get more dirt out of it. And I think it's just a good metaphor of what we're trying to accomplish. There's the tool of LinkedIn or other social networks. There's the tools of Navigator and other tools, but I just find the vast majority of people don't know how to use them efficiently or well. And unfortunately, a lot of companies get to the conclusion, a wrong conclusion of, we tried it and it didn't work, and therefore social selling or digital selling does not work.
Yeah, I think for me, what I view digital selling is really educating, engaging your prospective customers. And LinkedIn and other social channels give you a wide range of people to reach, right? But it's also not about the product and the widgets. It's about reaching those customers and prospective customers and helping them to educate them to understand that you know what their business challenges are, and not so much about what's under the hood of the product, but what the product successfully deployed, the benefits, the ROI, the time to value will give them. And build that trust, as you always say, Brandon, to be a trusted advisor, and doing it via these social channels.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
I would add to that it's like anything else, like any sales or any job or skill that you learn, there are steps that you take. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And when you follow those steps and you learn the skills it takes to implement those steps effectively, and you do that consistently, repeat, you get results. And just doing 2 of the steps out of 10 isn't going to work, right? Or doing them sporadically here and there as you remember them isn't going to work. These things aren't going to work. And there's 2 sides to the equation. There's the sales side and there's the marketing side. And marketing and sales need to understand that these steps aren't separate upon themselves, they're aligned. And if you're not getting content that doesn't allow you to do some of these steps in an impactful way, then you won't get results either. Furthermore, if marketing is putting out great content and the sales team isn't utilizing that content in an impactful way, as we spoke about, then you're not going to get results either. So it takes a true alignment today with respect to everybody on these teams to fully understand and leverage digital in a way that allows us to create digital enablement across the enterprise and the organization in order to get full results. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. And I guess I look at it from a granular level. So each salesperson has a target. They're in charge of that territory or those accounts. And so what's the fastest way for them to reach many? So I call digital selling the one-to-one and then the one-to-many, which is curating content that speaks to their industry problems and tells them is provocative. What should they be thinking about now? What should they be thinking about 6 months from now or even a year from now? They don't have the answers. That's why they're looking for advisors and vendors that can help them. And so each individual sales rep, if they know how to execute via social, following, these good execution steps and best practices, I have found in my experience they are much more successful, and they reach their target more often.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to take a quick minute to say good morning to Desiree, who popped in. Desiree's joining us from Facebook. Good morning, Desiree. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, Susan, I think to piggyback on that too is that what about the conversation around, and this is my hot button, you guys know it. I see social as a communication medium. That's it. It's a communication medium. It's, for me, analogous to having a room full of my ideal customers, and I need to go work the room and introduce myself and meet people and build the foundation of a relationship with them that earns the opportunity to have a business conversation. That's really my big bent, and where I have seen social as a medium be very successful for sales teams. What are your guys' take on that? And the reason I'm saying that, Susan, I heard you saying it's about curating content, it's about helping them with their challenges or problems, and I don't disagree with it. I think there's an and that goes with that. What do you think about that?
Well, I guess I do look at it a little bit differently, right? I look at it that yes, it is a communication tool. But it's also a place where you can really get your expertise, your individual expertise out there. I would say if you're posting content that is provocative and thought-provoking, right, that customers are wanting to read, then your work at going to find customers interested to talking to is not going to be so as difficult, right? And amplifying by curating content and posting content is a real significant part. But I also believe in the one-to-one of reaching out and creating those relationships. So I tell people I work with, it's not about how many connections you have. It's about how many connections that you have cultivated into building a more solid, trusted relationship. Does that make sense? And whether you
Yeah.
do that via email, move it to email, or you move it to text or Zoom or whatever, but you have to get there, right?
You know, I want to pick up on a point that Brandon made, and he talked about how we used to go into the networking rooms, right? And we used to meet, or a trade show room, right? And we used to meet all these people. Well, that room is right there, and now that room is, you know, hundreds of millions of people. In fact, you could argue billions of people at any given time. And getting to the point that we've all been talking about, there was, you know, I put in a post this morning some of the interesting stats with respect to this room, right? And the use thereof, and the use thereof is now up to almost 5 hours a day, right, by people.
Wow.
So, you know, the idea that you are going to get somebody's attention through the old methods, whatever they were, whether they be the networking rooms or the trade show rooms or whatever you want to discuss in that sense, is, well, it's ridiculous, right? We're past the point of saying, hey, you should try this, right? We're now at the point of saying, where are you?
You need to master it.
Yeah, I don't see you, and if I do see you, it's not impactful. So that's where we need to be, folks. And digital in 2022 is there. It's not where it used to be. It's there. And you know, whether you're in the medical industry, whether you're in the pharmaceutical industry or the insurance industry or the financial industry, I don't care where you are. Right. The fact is, your contacts, your customers, your friends are there.
Right.
And you deal with everybody the same way you deal with your friends. How do you reach out to your friend? Right? Do you send them an email? Do you send your friends emails? Is that what you do? I want them over for lunch today, or dinner tomorrow, or I'm going to send them an email. Is that what you do?
No, I text them.
Of course you do. Right? There's the room.
Chat, text.
Yeah.
Right? So why would you do that any differently?
Well, I'll tell you a story. Right before I retired from SaaS, I was working with a rep who was new to SaaS, but he was an older gentleman in his early 50s, and he set up a half hour with me because he said,
wait.
Yeah, I got that too, Brandon.
Did you just say early 50s is an older gentleman?
He wasn't 20. He wasn't new to sales. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Listen, I'm right there with you. But he said, I've sent out like hundreds of cold emails and I didn't get one response. I'm not getting anywhere. So we spent some time working on his messaging, working on his social. He got into LinkedIn and Navigator. And within 2 weeks, he had 38 out of 100 people not only connect to him on LinkedIn, but one was the CEO of a very large corporation. And he got 3 calls out of that. He was ecstatic, but he had to experience it. I do find that result happens often when I'm helping people turn to social channels, digital channels, instead of cold calling or emailing.
Yeah. Susan, earlier, several minutes ago, you said you used the word cultivate. How do you've got to use it as a tool to cultivate those relationships. I love that word. And I would normally say, like, we use social and everything you were saying is, I think you and I are very much aligned. We use some different words. Like, I see social as a communication tool because I could communicate with the world, or I could communicate with one person, or I could communicate with small groups of people based on sharing content, or going out and engaging with other people's content, or even sending direct messages to somebody one-on-one. But I want to go back to that Cultivate. How, and the example you just gave with this older gentleman, how do people cultivate relationships on social? And the reason I ask it is I hear often people don't want relationships on social, is what some sales reps will push back on, and why they don't want to use it.
Well, business relationships, and to me, it's all about showing value, right? I connect to people that I think can teach me something, or I'm looking for a vendor, or I'm looking for someone to fill that need. So what I tell the people I work with is the content that you curate and share can't just be any old thing. It has to be something that your prospects find valuable. So showing that you understand their customer problems, for instance, supply chain. Supply chain issues during COVID are huge. If you're selling the type of analytics we were selling at SAS, we had a supply chain solution that would help you with that. But just a rep going and say, I have these widgets, is not enough. You have to show that you truly understand the business problem. You understand that they need a way to fix it. You have what they need. And that starts that relationship and starts to build that respect. But you have to bring value. And not just messaging for messaging's sake, but true value to what's keeping them up at night.
I want to pick up on a point you made earlier too, Susan, and I love this because it takes that next step too for people that have done this and not met with the success that we're talking about. So I had a person that I trained a few years back, I want to say 4, in a manufacturing company, and we got them going in the very process that we're talking about. And in fact, I had this individual switch from the email campaign to a large degree and add in a cadence and a process by which to start connecting with people on, in this case, LinkedIn, and some on Twitter as well. And we built in that cadence, and lo and behold, one day he connected with a bunch of people, one of which was a CEO of one of the largest accounts that he's been working on. And he was so excited, right? And just that meeting that day was trying to keep bring this guy back down from the top of the ceiling, because he had made this connection, and I tried to tell him that that's great, that's the first step, and now you want to have an engagement and you want to build around that and all these great things, and we all know that, but that there is a cadence to it and there is a process and you have to do these things right. And the reason this guy had connected with him is because this individual is also a very avid fisherman. So they both had a topic in common, and they were fishermen, and there was, I forget what it was, it doesn't matter, but it was very specific. If you were a fly fishing person, right, this was something that you're going to understand. It made no sense to me whatsoever, but for these two, they were both right in sync, right? So he gets this connection. He had sent him some information on the fishing and what they were doing, and the next day, he decides that I'm just going for it, right? So he goes in there and he says, hey, whatever the gentleman's name was, been great chatting with you. Listen, I really like to set up a sales call with you because we do this and we do that, and we are the greatest. And I just think we would just have a fantastic discussion, and we develop, blah, blah, blah. Yikes. And nothing happened. In fact, and we've all come to learn this turn, he was ghosted.
Yeah, right? the door slams, because what happens when someone reaches out to you too quickly to sell their widgets? Not, hey, listening, social listening is very important too, right? What are that person's business challenges? What is keeping them up at night? And then, so I always say to people, don't talk about the widgets or sell the widgets. Sell solving the business problem, right?
And
educating is huge. educating in the right way is part of that cadence, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think in what Desiree says here with people can spell desperation, I think one of the challenges is in somebody comes, they've got these 30-day goals, and there's so much pressure on sales people that he may not have had the freedom to take that slow, which was actually necessary to win that deal, and probably felt pressured, numbers, and screwed up potentially a very large deal by going too quickly.
But the good news was he
Ah,
learned an incredible lesson, and as much as it took an awful lot of, what's the word I want to use, hugging in this case, at that time, this is pre-COVID, to sort of get him back emotionally, because he was it took a toll on him. But he also taught the team that I was training the same lesson, right?
right.
So they were able to avoid, the major faux pas that had been. So there's you're going to learn,
Yeah.
and that's part of the process. But the key to this that I really want to make a point on was that just because you do that and that happens doesn't mean that digital selling or social selling doesn't work. It means you're doing it lousy.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Patience is a virtue. Well, that's why I always say, don't be a one-hit wonder. You might get a bluebird, you might get lucky. But what you want to build and cultivate is that trusted relationship that helps you fill your funnel and go through the buying cycles year after year and get to club. We call it getting on the beach year after year. And the most successful salespeople I've seen do that are ones that put the target second. I know it's hard because there is a lot of pressure, and put the relationships first. And they build those long-term relationships.
Yeah.
And they
and I think
withstand the pressure of their sales management a little bit to say, I'm cultivating these relationships for the long term.
right. And it's always been that way. And I think obviously it definitely applies into digital, but it's always been that way. The best salespeople are the ones that have large networks. They've cultivated long-term, large network of relationships. They're known in their industry. They share content. They've have old school, pre-digital. They share content. They'd have great conversations. They would listen, and those were the things that got them to the point where then people would come to them and say, hey, we have a problem and we think you can help. Or when they did go call upon people, they're like, yeah, we want to talk to you. We've seen you. We know you. You've been around. I think all of that, all the old school stuff we used to do, just applied properly into digital is the answer. Or at least that's what we've seen the success with our customers.
Well, you used to be able to go golfing or go out for the 2 martini lunch or whatever it was. I add on to that to say salespeople have to understand the industry and the people they're selling into more deeply than they used to, especially with all the technology that's around, right? And how we're going into AI and how we're going in. Salespeople have to do the work of getting deeper than scratching the surface, I think. And that's
what do you mean by that, though? Because the reason I asked Susan is this: you mentioned we used to do golf. We used to have golf and 2 martini lunches, and that was very personal. That was very relational, and business is a part of it, but that's primarily relational.
I'm saying that I believe, and this is my personal opinion, that having those activities, yes, it solidifies the bond, but where the rubber meets the road is that relationship isn't of friendship or camaraderie isn't enough. You really have to be able to show proven value that your offerings or your people bring. And that equates into learning about your customers, listening to what they're struggling with, and being proactive as to how you can help them solve their problems.
Yeah, that's really, what, Susan, I think it used to be relationship got you the opportunity. I think now the trusted advisor status that is or is not applied to you, but if it is, through your content sharing, through your commenting in other people's posts and being seen and being known and bringing that value, that now gives you the right to earn the relationship, where it used to be the other way around. It used to be relationship earn the opportunity. What do you guys think about that? And I'm going to
Well,
show
and
Desiree.
Thomas, talk to how buyers are doing so much of their research online before they even talk to a vendor.
Yeah, and those things are all connected. I love what you said earlier, Susan, with respect to, salespeople, and this was always true. It's just that it's so much easier today. You have to do the research. Back in the day, and you just dialed the number and hope somebody picked up and it was the right person, and you take it from there. Well, you can't do that anymore. You need to know who you're talking to, why you're talking to, what that company does, doesn't do, that the background of the company, what the business problem may or may not be, the extent to which the solution or what I may be bringing has an impact, and how to get that in front of them, and all these things. And that needs to be learned before and not after. So when you're doing that, you have to do the research, as you alluded to with respect to the buyers. The buyers are already doing the research. The likelihood is, if you are well-known, well-connected, and not just as the individual in the profile that you've built, but also the organization that you're part of, they've already done the research on you. They already know more about you than you likely know about them. And that's not a good sign, right? So you need to know as much, if not more, about the buyers than they do about you, so that you can align all these things and bring them in and use the digital tools, right? And we have many of them that can be impactful in that process, because it is a process, but it has changed. That bar has changed. Before, buyers didn't necessarily know about us. We just sort of tapped them on the shoulder and say, hey, Susan, we have this. I see you're doing that. What do you think? Would that make your job easier? And Susan would say, go away, or yes, or yes, it would. But that's how it was done. Today, it doesn't work that way. Now the buyer has looked us up online, has a problem, has already found 2 or 3 potential solutions, and by the time they're in touch with you, which is usually the case, and they're in touch with you because you were there to be in touch with, right? Now they're asking you questions. You need to provide the data and the information to them that they need. And I read this term, I think it was early this week or last week, and I loved it. Just-in-time information. So we need to, but you remember the JIT, just-in-time inventory. Well, somebody coined it and said just-in-time information. And I love that, because that's what it is, right? We need to time what they need, when they need. So, there it is. And they pull it up. It's like the virtual reality thing. There it is. And they pull it in, and there you are. And now you're solving it. Now you're in the conversation. And all that relationship building and everything you've done comes to bear on that opportunity. And I'll shut up now.
No, you're good, because, and I want to pull this back up from what Desiree said, because I think this is a really good point too. She says at the end here, she's in leadership and personal development space, seems to take longer to cultivate to get to the close, trying to figure out a good cadence for this. Thomas, I know you talk a lot about a social cadence. You want to address that?
Oh, sure. And I think people are used to the steps that we used to take in sales and marketing in the past. All we're doing is taking that same thinking process, but now applying it to the digital world. So wherein before you would look up a company, you would do some information, look up on the internet, back in the day, and you'd look at their website and you'd learn a little bit about them. You'd find out who's who in the zoo. You'd get a phone number or an email. You'd email them or you'd call them, and there were all these steps. And you would try and align some content with that. And that was, and some of those things are still very much part of the cadence. It's not like all of that gets thrown away. What we do now is we add the digital steps to the cadence, because now we can engage with them online. So part of the cadence is what we call touch points. And we want to touch these contacts over a period of time, a number of times, so that we can gain the rights to engage with them, connect with them, and gain the opportunity to develop that engagement into something real, right? And at the end of the day, these things actually do dial, just in case anybody's wondering. At the end of the day, we can dial them and we can phone them. The phone is still important. It's just that cold calls don't work, but warm calls do. And when you tell somebody, hey, this has been great, we should have a quick call or a Zoom call, or, LinkedIn has right built into their DMing now the opportunity to have a video call right in messaging. And I've used it a couple of times. So there's lots of ways to do it, but you need to take the right steps. Step 1 through 10, repeat, 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 to build up your network, to build up the opportunities through a proper social digital cadence.
And to talk about what Desiree said, she's in the leadership and personal development space. I believe the goal is to become a thought leader on social channels. And how you do that is posting very focused, stay in your swim lane, third-party content for your brand, and original content if you can prove that you're an expert in a field or an initiative, or say it's fraud or whatever. Becoming that thought leader on a social channel it is personal development. You're becoming a leader, a thought leader, and you get a wider audience. And that's exactly what I did with our former chief sales officer of SAS. He had deep technical knowledge, but he also was head of sales. So we built his brand on LinkedIn and developed him to the wider audience, what he brought to the table as a leader and an executive. But I want to address one other thing you said, Thomas. So you're totally correct. We're not changing everything. I mean, you're still going to listen to quarterly calls. You're still going to read the annual reports to see what their initiatives are and what they're budgeting, right? You're still going to do that, but digital helps you do it more efficiently and reach a wider audience quicker. And it helps you define quickly through filters and other ways the best targets that are looking for what you are trying to help them with. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah. And I think that for Desiree and others too, I think your example of your CSO at SAS makes a lot of sense. It absolutely 100% agree with it. And I think for a lot of others who don't have that C-suite title in a $3 billion company, they also need to add their own engagement with other people. You've got to go introduce yourself to people. It's not just if I post it, they're all going to start coming. And I'm not against hashtags, but hashtags alone are not going to fill your, all these followers that go, ooh, tell me everything you know. There's so many content creators out there that I believe the big difference between those that create content and get frustrated and those that create content but go engage, they're digitally knocking on doors, they're digitally handshaking with people, they're digitally going into other conversations and thoughtfully, respectfully entering those conversations through comments and building relationships there. That helps grow their own readership, because now you're out there introducing yourself, you're opening your digital mouth, as I say, not just shouting, but you're opening your ears and you're having conversations. I see that is the biggest differentiator between those that are frustrated with their digital selling activities and those that are having success with digital selling activities.
And as your followers grow, you're building a reference base, right? So as people click, they care enough to follow you on social channels. That means they think you have something to say that they don't want to miss. And so therefore they could actually become references for you. And that ripple effect continues and continues and continues, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that moves into inbound, right? So using social to generate inbound. And Thomas and I will talk about this. Thomas, you had a really interesting week with that. How many inbound messages did you get just this week of people that have referred to your content, your ongoing content, and asked for a conversation?
I mean, every week can be a little bit different depending upon the content you put out there, but I would say on average 4 to 5 would be a fair number. But I would say that in addition to that, and this is much more powerful, by the way, the inbound is great, and some of that leads to real opportunities. There's no question about it, and that's what you're looking for. But you can create inbound as well, not just through your content. And this is the important part, and this tends to be one that people miss. They keep waiting for the inbound, and the inbound does come, and as you build up a good follower and you build up a good network, more of it does come, and some of it's out to lunch, and some of it's great, right? I mean, it's always a mixed bag. But engagement doesn't require you to have an enormous network or an enormous following or whatever else. Engagement requires you to be inquisitive, interesting, curious, supportive, empathetic, and to be a good listener. Those are all things that we don't all have in spades. So when you use those skills and you engage with people, hey, that was really interesting because I really understand that, because I really want to support this, and you get involved with people and you correlate those relationships, and they in turn now become followers, or they become part of your network because you've connected, or a combination of two. And it's not one network, it's multiple networks. This is not wholly about LinkedIn. This is also about Facebook group pages. This is also about Twitter and Instagram and all these great places, even to some degree Clubhouse. I can't tell you how many great connections I've now made in the last number of months from Clubhouse that have said, hey, I saw you there. I really wanted to connect. I had no idea they saw me there, right? So there are some overlaps that come in, and it's important to leverage as many as makes sense for you based upon who your customers are. But at the end of the day, it's the engagement that you can be doing right now. So you don't need 10,000 connections to engage,
Right?
but you do need to engage to get 10,000 connections.
Yes. And Robert here makes a point that I was a broken record the last year I was at SAS, that social or digital enablement needs to be integrated right into the sales methodology, planning, and execution. It's not separate. It is integrated into all the activities, whether it's recruiting for events, whether it's prospecting. These digital cadences or best practices need to be integrated right into the selling activities and methodology. It can't be an afterthought. It's got to be a part of the fabric. And I truly believe that.
Well, let me ask you this. That's
okay.
a fantastic point. Can you give us an example?
Yeah. So at SAS, the marketing teams were fabulous and the product teams were fabulous. They had these integrated marketing plans, covered everything from soup to nuts, except it didn't incorporate digital strategies. It didn't incorporate the cadences and messaging and when to execute and how to execute and training for it. And I strongly feel that that is missing at a lot of companies, and that needs to be happening. It needs to be mixed into the cake instead of an afterthought. For instance, onboarding, you get maybe a half hour and everything else is about the methodology. Well, it needs to be put right into the activities calendar. Social has to be integrated right into it. The methodology and the best practices and how to execute has to be part of it instead of just a side dish. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and I love it. I can't tell you how many people have told me, well, I spend 10, 15 minutes a day connecting and being on social. What else do I have to do? And now I'm going to go back to them. I'm going to say, well, how long have you spent on this? Because there's your answer, right? And I can't tell you how many times I've been in a boardroom where the pushback is, we don't have time for that. We're busy. And it's like that example of the guy with the square wheel, right? The guy chased him with the round wheel, saying, "Wouldn't this be a better idea?" He says, "I'm too busy for that." Right? The point is, everything you're doing is not having the same impact. So you're too busy with the wrong stuff. So why don't we weed out what isn't working, replace it with some of the things in addition to what the skills that you've developed, and put it all together and create something that will work. And now you do magically have time, because that's where time should be spent.
Well, I think you have to show forth the results. You have to start off with showing them the why, the reason why. Because I also I understand there's product training, there's all kinds of training, there's all kinds of pressures on salespeople and everything. But if the results, which we know are so powerful, that right there proves that a change is needed, right?
Good point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're spot on there. It's hard for them to see the answer under so much pressure, yet it's the pressure that screams the need to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I think one of the things that I've learned a lot from Thomas, of course, but one of the things that Thomas has shared with me as we talk to potential customers, and this isn't really more about sales pitch, but it's more about clarity of where companies are. And there's a lot of companies that just aren't there yet. And even they say they are, or that's where I think Thomas, you're saying, oh, we're all over digital, we're all over social, but they really aren't. I mean, it's interesting to see how many companies are still feeling the pain and not willing to start trying some of the things that are proving to be successful in the name of this is the way we do things.
Well, and I agree with Robert. If we was integrated into all of the sales planning activities and whatever, you would have both consistency and frequency, and it would start to change the culture of the way selling occurs or engagement occurs. And it's not just the sales teams, as we've talked about. It's not just people with targets. There are industry experts and other thought leaders throughout the company that should be digitally active and proving worth, right?
Yeah, and I think it. Oh, go ahead, Thomas.
No, please go ahead, Brian.
I think it goes back to the touches. It's always been about cadences. It's always been about touches. It's always been about establishing that foundation. And you can call it relationship. You can call it trust. You can call it value. It doesn't really matter what term we use. It's those touches, that repetition, that frequency that establish is, I think, in digital world, that perception of trusted advisor or thought leader that earns the right to the relationship, that earns the right to that virtual coffee or that conversation, that then becomes that first conversation that can lead, when done well, into a sales opportunity.
And one thing we haven't talked about here is that snackable type of content, curating content for social and digital is fabulous, but we're all click happy, right? So I always say snackable content, whether it's an infographic that can really be captured, that's colorful, that's informative, that shows value, whether it's a short video, less than 2 minutes, that's the sort of snackable content that I like to read and that catches my interest on social. So creating the right content with the right cadences, with the right messaging, focused on outcome. Voila.
And in the mix,
yeah,
your personality and your individuality, right? So you still need to be a person, and you still need to show that, and that pulls it all together, right? How many companies do we know that, as Brandon alluded to, so we're all over social, and we're putting up, our marketing department, I've increased their budget, and I've doubled it over the last couple of years, and we're using an agency, and we're doing all this, and they're putting tons of content up there, all with our logo taking up half the page, right? how, we're the greatest, we're the greatest, we're the greatest. Can't you tell we're the greatest? If the louder you say that, people got to hear it, right? Well, the louder you say that, the more they're clicking off, not on, right? And just because you're doing that doesn't mean you're having impact. And that's where the difference is. Just being all over in that sense does not mean impact. And what you're talking about with creating that cadence and the touch points and all this really, really does. I used to coach soccer, right? And I coached soccer with my kids for years and years and years. It was a blast. And the thing I told the kids, right, that was always true, and it had been taught to me when I was a kid, so it wasn't something I made up. But the thing I told the kids, which is exactly what Braden talks about so well in his training, is that the more times you touch that ball, the more likely it is you're going to score. So if you can touch that ball 10 times or whatever that number is, the likelihood of your scoring or being part of a goal for the team gets higher and higher and higher. And the less times you touch that ball, it's not going to happen. You don't touch the ball, not much is going to happen for you.
What is it, like 10,000 hours to perfect something or rather?
Yes.
Well,
that's
everybody is in sales. Everybody, you'll hear executives say it all the time, everybody's in sales, right? And there are experts throughout the company, and your company is made up of your culture. And so I agree with you, being genuine, getting your passion about the company and the people you work with and the experts that are part of your company that all make up humans, a human organization is important. People buy from people.
They
right?
do. They do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I think, Thomas, you brought up, bringing in your own personality and bringing an individual is so important to it. Because I think early in social, 2010, 2011, whatever, I think we just kind of collectively forgot that there was real human beings on the other side. The internet, social became a big place where everybody shouted. And it's taken a lot longer than I expected for that to start getting reversed. There's still a lot of shouting that takes place in social media, and not enough listening and not enough engaging and talking. And I would say for anyone listening that's ever been frustrated with their digital selling or any of the, if nothing else, would start on engaging with other people. And I don't, the content, publishing content, sharing curated content, sharing original content, all that is exceptionally important. But engaging and just going out and digitally shaking people's hands and introducing yourself, I think that's where the magic starts for me.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Back in the day, we used to tell salespeople, you were just telling me this the other day, Brandon, they had to make, 8 calls? You had to make 8 calls before you would, generally connect and begin that process. And salespeople only made 2, right? So very, very few of them ended up hitting quota, and there was a large turnover. This is the same thing, only now using digital process, which is so much easier, right? Yeah. And the rejection part of it, if you want to call it that, is simply that somebody might not connect. Big deal, right? So
well, there is if you do it the wrong way, you not only have a no, but you've got that wall shut down. You get a hell now no. You have to try to break it down at some point in the future, right?
Well, that's where your skill and experience comes in, because sometimes that's true, but not always, right? So we all know that 71%, 72% of all the people that are on LinkedIn are not active on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? So it doesn't mean that you got to know. It means that they're not home, right? And they go onto LinkedIn once a month, whether they have to or not. So what that means is now I know I need to surround that person internally, right? Especially if it's a larger organization, because it takes more than one contact. Sometimes it's 20, 25 contacts in an organization. And I probably need to find them and their teams. I got to stop using my hands like that. And their teams in other places. So not just LinkedIn, but on Twitter, on Facebook, on their own social media, and where they're at, because that's where they are. You want to find people within a company, go into the corporate Twitter accounts and look at who's following the Twitter account, because guess what? That's where most of them are. It's not rocket science.
No.
Right? These are the things that we teach and we show people how to use, so they can now connect with them there, connect the dots back there, and now begin the and that.
And social channels, digital channels are even more important because people are moving around and changing jobs like never before. And
Yes.
one thing I love about LinkedIn, some of these channels, are that even if somebody moves, you're going to still find them there. You're going to get on LinkedIn, you can get, prompts. Someone else, they've moved to another role. Well, what if they were a key person in your sales cycle? You sure as heck want to know if they've left, if you're not in close enough range to know when they've left. So that social listening and keeping tabs on where people are going, maybe you had a great relationship here, maybe there's now an opportunity at their new company. So it's that ongoing, living, breathing cycle when you execute. I guess that's the way I look at it. It's ever changing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that it's ever changing, and we have these tools that help us do the research. I mean, I think, Susan, you started our conversation talking about, and Thomas, you did too, about do the research, share the content, add value. You got to know about them. Well, simultaneously, I think it's using the tools, knowing how to use the tools to find the information that we need. As Thomas just said, go to their Twitter page and see which employees are on Twitter, which ones are active, and go, oh, they may not log into LinkedIn very often, but I found them over here on Twitter, and they're on Twitter every single day. Well, now you know where that person is, and now you can go over there and join them. If they're that, important to you, then you can go over there and do that. I think there's this, the tendency is, well, I'm going to go into my favorite platform, I'm going to go post stuff, and after about 2 whole weeks of doing that, I didn't get a sale. I'm going to throw my hands in the air and go, well, this didn't work.
Nope, it's a marathon.
Exactly.
It's an ongoing marathon.
Exactly.
But when it works, and I don't want to throw numbers out here, but I kept track in a 6-month period when the CSO I was helping, we passed a good 25 hot leads to the field around the world. I mean, it worked. He was considered an expert in the field. People respected him. They contacted him, and he was able to act as a rainmaker. And don't think it was just because of his title. Anyone, I've experienced it, you've experienced it, when you bring value to people by sharing your expertise and helping them and providing value, they will want to engage with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can take out the social words, the social media words, and just say, when you have an expertise and you're sharing it with people, people listen.
Mm-hmm.
People that's important to will listen. What was that old E.F. Hutton commercial? You remember that? Did you guys remember that? It was they were in a restaurant.
E.F. talks, people listen, or something.
Yeah, exactly. It goes, well, my broker says, and the whole place just stops and goes like this and listens, right? I mean, it is like that when you're actually sharing good quality information, the communities listen. But you also have to, make sure that they know you're there talking, not just talking.
Not just yelling.
Not just yelling. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're coming up to the time. You guys want to wrap us up and summarize what we talked about?
Go ahead, Thomas. You take us home.
Did we answer the question, what is digital selling in 2022?
Well, I think digital selling 2022 is doing exactly what we've talked about. Smartly engaging in the right way, educating on the value, and creating relationships that last year after year after year. That's as simple as I can put it.
And I like it. I don't even know if I want to add to that. At the end of the day, what is it in 2022 versus what it was maybe in 2021? It's actually the same thing. It's just more pressing today, because more and more people are on these things, as we talked about, than it ever was before. And if you think there was pressure for you to reach your numbers last year, wait for this year. So, and the only thing I would add to that, and this becomes a really important point for many, is if your company is not getting with the program, and you know that you need to get this kind of training, and you need to have this kind of opportunity that you can work on, reach out, and we can help you with that. And if you need to make a change, you know, and find a company that does do it properly and does want to learn, then we'll help you with that too. Right. So we want people to know and companies that do indeed want to allow and give their people the right tools and training to do all this, we're obviously here for that as well.
Yeah, that's really good. And I did, just to emphasize that, I did get a call. I got a message on LinkedIn asking for a conversation, and it was a company asking if we had any salespeople that we trained that knew our methodology, because they were looking for digital selling people that they could plop into a role. Not, they said, we may have to hire people and send them to you for training, but do you know anybody that you've already trained that would want to come and represent our company? So that's happening
companies
too.
better. I believe companies would it would help retention as well.
Yeah,
I would say teach them how to sell where the customers are doing their research, and that's online.
Yeah. Well, and just hopefully a quick story, but talked to a sales leader several months ago, and it was, hey, I want to bring this in. I want to bring this in. Didn't get permission, didn't get the budget. The emphasis was told, we're going to do more. Everyone's got to make more phone calls, and we're going to send out more emails. We're going to get more email lists. And this gentleman told me, he said, you know what? I'm going to go through the same thing I've done the last several years. Hire people. We've got these commission goals in front of them. They're not going to get those deals because the tools and systems we're telling them to do don't produce. About 9 months in, most of them quit because they realize they're not going to make the income they were promised. And he said, I go back into hiring, training, they quit. Hiring, training, they quit. And guess what he did? He left. He left.
Yep.
But now in another company, he's engaged us and said, okay, now let's talk. So, well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And if you're seeing this on one of our pages, our personal pages, come join us on Digitize HQ. We have groups in Facebook. We have group in LinkedIn. We are working on getting the website created with the free community. And we talk all things digital. If you want to join us on a show and be a guest, just reach out to any one of us. And we'd be glad to get that arranged. Especially reach out to Thomas. He coordinates all this. So he's the one that lets us come and join him. So, all right, everybody, have a great Friday.
Thanks again, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.